All right, Barry Hinson joining us this morning. I can't wait to hear the punchline to this. So, Barry, how's the Oklahoma summer heat treating you?
Tell you what, it's so hot. Last night I saw a robin sticking his worm in a snow cone.
You don't disappoint. You don't disappoint. All right, let's go all the way back to the beginning. When do you first remember getting the basketball bug?
Well, I got the basketball bug. I was very fortunate. I played for a guy that played for Mr. Iba, and then eventually here at Oklahoma State or Oklahoma A&M, and then transferred out to Panhandle State. But a guy came into Marlow, Oklahoma. It would have been probably my freshman or sophomore year, by the name of Jerry Havens. And it really had an unbelievable impact on me and my life. But at that time, he was kind of a Bobby Knight protege and a really hard-nosed guy, but there was something about him. I connected with him, and I wasn't a great player by any means. And he reminded me of that often, that I was not a great player. I can remember one of his best lines was, I told him one time I shot the ball, and he said, "Well, there's a reason you're open. You just pass the basketball." And but anyway, I had a love-hate relationship there with him, but much more great respect for him. And I kind of got the bug. And then of all the things that happened, Jeff, when I went to Oklahoma State University, I couldn't afford to pay for school. My mom and dad, my mom was a housewife. She had a degree from Baylor University. My father was a Southern Baptist minister. I don't know if you know how much about Southern Baptist ministers in communities of 5,000. They're just not breaking the economic stratosphere. Sure. I think my dad made $37,000. I think that's the most money he really ever made. And we weren't, this is not one of those stories where there was always food on the table. There was always love in the house. We were always taken care of. But my dad just didn't make a lot of money. And when it came time for his two boys to go to school, we had to work our way through school. So my very first job was work for the College Work Study Program. And back then they had what's called OTAG, Oklahoma Tuition Aid Grant, and the BEOG, which is now Pell, the Basic Educational Opportunity Grant. And I got a couple of scholarships to come to Oklahoma State. I got a $50 U.S. savings bond from the American Legion, and I got a $35 scholarship from the Lions Club. So I am happy to announce, though, that $50 U.S. savings bond is now matured to $114. So I'm still hanging in there. But, I didn't have a scholarship, so I had to work. And I literally worked two jobs while I went to school. I was the graveyard shift at the dorms. I worked from 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. every morning. And it's amazing what you learn from 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. at the dormitories, who's coming in and who's coming out.
Sure.
And you get a good scout report on a lot of people at that time. And but anyway, I did that. And I also worked at an office supply company delivering office supplies. But I would come over here to Gallagher, which this is where this is taking place right now. It was called Gallagher at the time. Now it's Gallagher Iba Arena. And I was basically, if you want to get down to it, a glorified name, I was janitor. And I would mop floors, clean the bathrooms, put toilet paper on the rails. And I was the guy. We didn't even have those little yellow signs that you put wet mop. You just put you wrote on a piece of paper and taped it. I was old school. Hey, I'm in the bathroom. Hang on, whatever. But that's where I started. And then lo and behold, because I was in this building, I was around Mr. Iba all the time. And I just got the bug. I got the bug. I had always, coaches and teachers were always big in my life. And I had an unbelievable respect for them. And still to this day, I believe this in my heart, the most underappreciated, unheralded people in our society are teachers and coaches. I could sit here and I could ask you, and anybody listening to this podcast right now, I could just say, okay, I want to know the best actor, female leading role last year who won the Oscars. I want to know Major League Baseball's player of the year. I want to know the NFL offensive lineman of the year. Right. And virtually no one would tell you who those people are. And those are the people that we idolize. But if I ask any of those people, who is the most influential person in your life, I guarantee it, 90% of them are going to come back to a teacher, a coach, somebody with that type of regard. And it's just amazing to me that we don't talk about that more than what we do.
If you had been the janitor in the math building and you had not been at the basketball arena, is that a happy accident, or do you think you find your way there eventually, find the coaching path eventually?
First of all, if I'd have been a janitor in the math building, it would have probably been a scene from Good Will Hunting. I would have probably stopped out beside the chalkboard of the professor's office and probably figured out one of those problems that he posted out there, and been known as one of the most incredible, smart mathematicians out in there in the world. And for those that are listening now, if you believe that, then I've got lots of land I need to sell you in Oklahoma. But I still get pissed off if I can't balance my checkbook. So that would have never happened. First of all, they would have fired me immediately because I couldn't have figured out what was 12A and 12B probably in offices. But, I think all of us, my dad taught me a long time ago, even though he's a Southern Baptist minister, he said, we don't talk religion and we don't talk politics. And he taught me that. He said, and if you do so, it better be in company that you understand that you can do that with. Which leads me to this statement. I get up every day and I think I'm in charge, but I was raised with faith. I was raised to knowing that we really aren't in charge. And I truly believe that everything, as I look back, and that goes back to being fired at Missouri State University, to being fired, resigning at Southern Illinois University, for a little fit that I made one night in Murray, Kentucky. I think all these things happen for a reason as we look back and we go, you know what? I couldn't have planned that stuff out. And I'm in Oklahoma now. Let me just tell you what the statement would be. I couldn't have planned that shit out. I mean, we're on a podcast. I can say that.
There you go.
I couldn't say that back when you were working. You couldn't use the word shit. You just have to say stuff. But, I really couldn't have planned that out.
You were invited to Mr. Iba's home at some point during your janitorial duties. Walk me through that invitation and sort of the emotions of, because you know who you're talking to. I mean, you're talking to one of the all-timers. And how do you go from pushing brooms to sitting in his living room?
Well, first of all, I think I bugged him so much he finally gave in. He just said, will you just come to my house? And it would have been, to put it in perspective today, it would have been like, can I come out to Tom Brady's house and talk to him about football?
Yeah.
Because when I did that, Mr. Iba, you can't fathom the amount of people that would come in here and fly in or come visit or fly Mr. Iba out to the practices. Coach Knight would fly him out. People would come in here. The day I was there, he had just talked to Coach Knight. George Raveling had sent him a FedEx package of a bunch of Iowa gear. And I'll never forget, because it was raining. It was pouring down. He said, would you run out the mailbox to get it for? And I went out there and then the FedEx driver, would you run it? Yeah. And FedEx trucks were a lot different back then, believe me. And matter of fact, I don't even think it was FedEx. It was probably UPS or something, but I went out there and got it and brought it back. And he's opening up the box. He goes, oh, George sends me this Iowa stuff. I'm not wearing this Iowa stuff. I don't know why he sends it to me. And he's got pennants and stuff all in there. And then Dean Smith had called while I was there. But I was in awe. I brought a notebook, and I'll never forget. He said, I'm going to talk and you're going to listen. Put that notebook away. And he talked to me about 8 things. And Jeff, I thought by the time he got to number 4, this guy's going to ask me to repeat 1 through 8. And I'm scared to death. And I don't even know what items 4, 6, and 5 are. I mean, I got no chance because I'm scared to death he's going to ask me to repeat them. But this is what I do remember. And I'll remember this until the day I die. And I tell this story at all the coaching clinics that I teach. Mr. Iba said, all you pups, and I was a pup at that time, all you're concerned about is trying to put that orange thing in the hole. The first thing you have to figure out as a coach is how to keep that orange thing out of the hole. And that's the greatest lesson I've ever learned from any coach in my entire lifetime. And I've only worked for 4 head coaches in my lifetime. And 3 of those guys are in the Hall of Fame. And one of them, I think, Mike Boynton, is tracking towards the Hall of Fame. But I worked for Jerry Havens, which we talked about earlier. I worked for a guy named Mike De La Garza in Edmond, Oklahoma. And both those guys, consequently, are in their state Hall of Fames in Oklahoma. And then I worked for Bill Self at the University of Kansas, which it's amazing to me, the John Calipari's and the Bill Selfs and, the guys that are still coaching that are in the Hall of Fame. It just blows my mind that a guy could be in the Hall of Fame and he's still coaching. But that, to me, shows the respect that people have for those and how good they really are. So I've been blessed. I really have. And to be around Mr. Iba, to literally ignite my career at that time, that's what started. And then in 1983, when I graduated from Oklahoma State University, Duke, North Carolina, Kansas, Kentucky, UCLA, they didn't need a head coach at the time. So I decided to start my career at Stillwater Junior High, literally coaching 8th grade basketball. And I'd actually coached.
And you started there, you were a senior in college when you started.
I was
correct?
Actually, to be honest, I was a junior in college when I took the 8th grade junior high job. But I got paid, I think, Jeff, if I'm not mistaken, I think I got paid $650 to do that. But when I graduated, I got offered a head coaching job at Oilton High School here in Oklahoma. And I went on the interview and the superintendent says, "We want to hire you, but there is no way in the world your wife's going to move to Oilton, Oklahoma." Because during the quiz process, and they provided housing, there was a double wide right next to the high school that they provided for the coach. And I tried to tell my wife free housing, but there was no grocery store. There was no gas station, no movie theater. The guy goes, "You got no chance, buddy. Don't even take this back to your wife." And he was right, because I asked my wife, she goes, "I'm not moving to Oilton." So in August of 83, even that late, I got hired to be at Stillwater Junior High. And really, it was kind of crazy, because my first team of AAU basketball, I coached a guy that was in professional sports, Brent Price. And Denny Price, they lived in Enid. And I got a chance to coach Brent Price as a 7th grade AAU amongst a bunch of kids here from Stillwater. And we won the state championship in Oklahoma. And that's before they really had teams that went to nationals at that time to go, like Orlando. And I was too young at the time. I didn't really understand how that worked, because we were just going to the state of Oklahoma and playing in the AAU event. But we ended up winning that. And all of those young men, I still today, matter of fact, I see those guys, a lot of those guys in Stillwater often now, as I'm out to lunch or whatever. And I still think of the Price family. I got to see Mark not too long ago recruiting. 3 or 4 years ago, we were in the same gym recruiting. And it's just good to see, to talk about the good old days.
When you're 20, 21 years old and you're running a team, and it's an 8th grade team, and I believe your and my storied athletic paths are pretty parallel. I was a great water drinker and towel waver, but I wanted to coach. Somewhere I was like, I think I want to coach. And when I was in college, I spent 4 years either coaching 7th grade or 9th grade. And the biggest challenge I had at the time was I felt like I was very smart about the game, especially with a bunch of 7th graders. But it was the part of getting whatever I thought I had in here and getting it to here and being able to explain it. And it ended up just being this, I just yelled a lot. I was like, I don't know what I'm teaching these kids, but I'm just mad all the time. But did the teaching component of the game come naturally to you? I mean, obviously you're a great communicator, but at that age, dealing with a bunch of 14-year-olds, how did that work for you?
Well, when you say 14-year-olds, just remember, I was only 7 years
Oh,
older.
sure.
Than these guys.
Right.
Some of them 6 years older. So I'm coaching a group of guys that seriously, these guys could be my brother or my
Yeah.
cousin or whatever. But, I go back. Naturally, I learned from great teachers, great coaches. One of the greatest people that impacted my life, mother and father, were the greatest impact on my life. Jerry Havens was a huge impact on my life. But to be honest, probably as much as, if not more than anybody, it was my vocational agricultural instructor, Ernest Muncrief. And how many college basketball coaches can say you're FFA instructor? But he got me involved. I go back, we didn't have any money and we couldn't afford cattle or hogs, or we couldn't do that. You know what my FFA project, and you have to have an FFA project. My project, I kid you not, was a beehive. I had bees. I had 3 or 4 hives in our backyard. And I'm not shitting you, Jeff, beehives. And so all these guys are taking their Hereford steers. Hereford was real big back at that time, and maybe a little Santa Gertrudis. Angus wasn't as big back then, and they'd blowing them out, and they got them all trimmed up, and they look great. And the guys on the cow team would just look at me like, hey, they would bring me a needle and thread with the thimble and just say, hey, use this to show off your bees. And I mean, it was just a standing joke. So literally, I'm the only guy in my class. Matter of fact, I may be the only guy in the history of Marlow High School that went to the county fair with jars of honey. That was what I was showing. I mean, that's so. And
Did you get at least a ribbon for
I
that?
did not get a ribbon. I was a bad strainer. I couldn't strain that honey. There were bee legs in my honey. I mean, but like this day and age, those people with allergies, that's the best kind of honey there is. But yeah, my honey wasn't clear. It was cloudy honey. But I go back. I learned from great teachers, and I love this. Everybody talks about, oh, this guy does this, he does this. But I've not done one thing. Let's get one thing straight. I've not come up with one thing ever in my life. Now I may come up with something barbecue wise, recipe wise, but in coaching, it has always been that I've learned from someone else. And I'm still today. I Coach Boynton, it surprises me. And I've been here now going on my 4th year with him. But there's a new generation of coaches, and the old school coaches are being pushed out the building. And I'm an old school coach. And I'm the guy that if you make a turnover, you come sit next to me. And there were 2 things that would just explode me. It was free throw blockouts and turnovers. I hated them. I hate 2 things or 3 things. I hate those 2 things. And those are the only 3 things I hate in life. I mean, hate. And I don't like that word. I don't like the word hate, but I hate those three things. But Coach Boynton has shown me today's athlete, you can't coach like that. And I would think that had I had a little bit of his knowledge when I coached, my career path may have been a little different. But who knows? Who knows?
You go through your junior high stint, you spend a couple of years as an assistant, and then at 26, Bishop Kelly, you get your first varsity head coaching job. Why at 26 did you think I'm ready for this?
Well, one, because I'm an idiot. I'm a full-blown idiot. So I've always thought if you had said, we're going to change the oil in your car for $15 back at that time, it was a lot of money. I said, no, I'd change the oil. And, I'm one of those guys that said, no, I'm not paying this. I'm going to do it myself. Same thing came with head coach, but I thought I was ready. And Mike De La Garza, I went back, was the head coach at Edmond High School. Edmond at that time was the 2nd largest school in the state of Oklahoma. And I was the JV coach. And matter of fact, great story here for those that love women's basketball. Sherry Cole, national champions and coach at Oklahoma, went Final Four and all that stuff. And I think Sherry won a national championship. I
believe she did, yes. Several Final Fours, if nothing else.
Yeah, several Final Fours. But anyway, let's just say she's national champion because first of all, she's a friend of mine. But Sherry was the JV coach at Edmond High School, and I was the JV coach at Edmond High School. So we two, our path started right there. Hers went a little better than my path, Jeff, but I tease her every time I see her. I said, between us, we have several Final Fours.
There you go.
But that's kind of where that got started. And then Mike De La Garza was Catholic. He had a Southern Baptist guy on his staff, and he went and spoke at a Knights of Columbus meeting in Tulsa. And they said, we're looking for a coach. And he said, you need to hire my assistant, Barry Hinson. And so I was part of the Catholic mafia, got me in there at Bishop Kelly.
Did you feel there's a difference between, being a middle school coach and obviously running a varsity program, and you got several years under your belt at this point, but do you remember in that first year there in 87, I guess, when you got the job, did you feel over your head? Was there a constant hand on the life preserver, or did you feel like you kind of, maybe I'm going to fake it till I make it?
No, there's a lot of fake it till I make it, but no, I go back to that idiot part of me. I was too young and dumb to understand that I was doing anything wrong. Sometimes when we're youthfulness, we think we know everything. And I wasn't a guy that thought we knew everything, but I certainly had a lot of confidence. And I had confidence. I go back, had a lot of confidence because the two guys that taught me basketball up until that point in time. And, Larry Brown once said this, and I believe this. Larry Brown once said this at a clinic. He said, I don't care if you've been a head coach of an elementary school, a head coach of a junior high, a head coach of a high school. You guys have experience as a head coach, and that makes all the difference in the world. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're a janitor. If you're the head janitor, you're the head janitor. And, Truman had it right. Every one of us, regardless of what we do, even as the head of your family, the buck stops with you. And when you take a job, you don't have the opportunity. Now, I would certainly make phone calls back to Coach De La Garza, Coach Havens, or whomever I'd met at that time and just say, hey, we're struggling with this, that, what do you think? And then a lot of that you're learning on the fly as well. So, but I didn't feel like I needed a life preserver. And if I did, thank goodness I was mature enough at the time that I would ask questions. I love asking questions. And I also made an enormous amount of mistakes. And certainly we know that that's the only way we learn. I am intelligent, Jeff, because I have screwed up an enormous amount in my lifetime.
How were you as a history teacher?
I was good.
Yeah,
I really was. I was a good teacher. I was not the coach that turned on the projector, watched movies, all that. First of all, you couldn't do it. We had Brother Bernadine, which at that time, Brother Bernadine may have been in his 60s. And he taught calculus and physics, trigonometry, basically all the courses that I was never enrolled in. He was in the smart courses, but I was scared of Brother Bernadine because he asked me, are you going to be one of those coaches that just shows videos? I enjoyed teaching. I loved it. First of all, coaching is teaching.
Sure.
It always has been. And it's not where they just gave you the term coach, but probably the greatest label that I've ever had on my life is being a teacher. So, but I did. I enjoyed teaching history. I taught U.S. history. I taught a section on the American presidency. I started off here at Oklahoma State as pre-law political science. So politics had always been in my DNA. I worked at that time. I was governor of Oklahoma Boy State in 1978. I was allowed and asked to represent David Bourne, which was the governor of Oklahoma at that time, to travel around in his United States senatorial campaign, which he ended up winning. And he had a campaign slogan of sleep out or sweep out old guard politics. And I literally carried a broom everywhere he went with Bourne for U.S. Senate on the front of that broom. So I was involved in politics way ahead. So those are some of the classes that I taught.
Your second year, a little research we found, March 9th, and the part about this that's interesting to me is the symmetry of some of it that we will circle back to. March 9th, 1989, you're in the opening round of the 4A state tournament in a game that's being played at Oral Roberts. And before the game, you shook hands with Richard Roberts, the son of Oral. And you beat unbeaten and defending state champion Star Spencer 50-46. Do you remember that game?
I remember every part of it. I remember the day vividly. Probably, I've been involved in some great games before, but that's probably one of the greatest games I've ever been involved in. Not only was Star Spencer undefeated, but they also ranked. They are either first or second ranked in USA Today when they did the high school rankings, and they were known as the team, the best team in Oklahoma. And we had a kid that get fouled late, literally late, got fouled late, and at critical part of the game, last seconds of the game. And his name was Jimmy Nichols. And Jimmy went to Oklahoma State. Matter of fact, he was a manager for Coach Sutton. He's still very close with Scott Sutton. And I'll never forget coming out of the timeout. I told him, if you miss these 2 free throws, I'm going to shoot your dog. And he said, I don't have a dog. So we laughed. And it was the reason I said it. Basically, I'd kind of heard that at a clinic a long time ago, but I remember the reason it was said was to make light of the moment and take the pressure off of him. Left-handed guy went up there, boom, made both of them. And then we had another bucket late in the game to win. It's that team and that article hangs in my office today at my house. And those group of young men that were part of that, I still visit with often.
I feel like Gene Hackman and Hoosiers, you said after.
I felt exactly that way.
Yeah.
No question. And at the floor, I told President Roberts, it's a true story. When I shook his hand, he said, I went up to him. He didn't search me out.
Sure.
He
Sure.
didn't know who I was. I'm just some short guy over there wearing suspenders coaching. Suspenders were very popular at the time, by the way. And I went over there and I said, I was really sped up. I was going, Mr. Roberts, I'm Barry Hinson. I live Coach Mr. Kelly. We're expecting a miracle today. And because that's what was painted on the floor. And that one statement, that one handshake would really play and pay in my career.
Were you sort of a master of the pregame speech, the halftime speech? Did you get that early? Did you enjoy that aspect of the job? The rah-rah, let's put the X's and O's aside, but I'm going to get you ready to run through this wall for me.
Yeah, I think early on I thought it was more about that and less about the X and O's. And I quickly learned out real quick. It wasn't about that, nor was it about the X and O's. It was about the thoroughbreds. Coach Sutton taught me that. And Abe Lemons taught me that. Abe Lemons used to say, it's not about the X's and O's, it's about the Jimmies and Joes. So I learned that real quick as my career and my path kept going along. It's about players. It's not any about that other stuff. How good of players do you have? But I got to give my dad credit. It's, sitting in all those Southern Baptist church Sundays, Wednesday nights, Sunday mornings, listening to Billy Graham, going to Southern Baptist conventions, hearing all those evangelicals. And even then, we're going to circle to it, but going to Oral Roberts, hearing all those evangelists. Yeah, I got a lot of good stuff for halftimes and stuff. So yeah, I thought I was pretty good at that.
What was the most important tool in your coaching toolbox that you got from your dad as that Southern Baptist preacher and just as the guy in your house every day?
The most important tool we have in our society today that we need more and more. You just got to love people, man. Jeff, you got to love them. Those kids won't listen. They won't respect you unless they know you love them. And if they know you love them, they'll do anything for you and you'll do anything for them. I got an email, not an email. I got I'm on Facebook now.
Oh, congratulations.
Well, it's a big meal for me because I didn't want to be on Facebook, but I had a rototiller that I needed to sell and I found out you could sell it on Facebook Marketplace. And I sold it in 2 days for $400. a rototiller. So,
Congratulations.
yeah,
Big
yeah.
time.
And I bought it for $250 on a clearance at Lowe's. So it was $150 profit. So while I'm in there on that Facebook marketplace, all of a sudden these players, former players, start dinging me or whatever it's called. You know, I don't know what that stuff is. And I started getting all these notifications
There you go.
and messages. And I got a message from a young man that played for me at Southwest Missouri State and didn't finish his career with us. And it wasn't amicable at the time in which he left. And I really liked the kid. I loved him. I thought he was very talented. He was very talented, really big time athlete, but musically inclined. And he sent me a message just out of the blue. And he said, Coach, and hey, I just went to eat with my kids, and I gave them the speech about we leave it better than we found it. Pretty big day.
I bet.
Yeah. That's why we coach. Ibi Djembe from Mali will text me on Sunday that he loves me. It's Father's Day. Terrence McGee, my assistant, that played for me, will call me and tell me that he loves me. So yeah, I learned that from my dad. It's the most important thing. God, we need more of that right now, Jeff. We need more of that right now. You know, I just spoke at Boys State, went back 44 years later. And I told those guys, Uvalde, Buffalo, Sandy, what if we'd have been kinder, more gentle to those people, or what, you know, they're having a bad day, whatever. What if we'd have been nicer? I don't know. I don't have I go back, don't talk religion, don't talk politics. I'll go back, but I do know this, that I think if we treat people better, that will help us in a lot of scenarios.
1991, you handed a letter to Dick Vitale.
I did.
What do you remember about that letter?
Hand delivered, handwritten.
And he wrote back.
I will, first of all, for me to say I'm close to Dick Vitale would be, I'm not close with Coach.
Everybody's close to Dick Vitale.
Everybody's close.
Yeah.
And I still call him Coach because he was a coach right prior to him coming on. And, but I did. And he wrote me back. Actually, he was on an airplane and he wrote me back and he said, don't ever give up your dreams. And it was while I was at Bishop Kelly. And I'll never forget that. I love Dick Vitale. I love him. He has no idea the impact he's made on my life, but I don't think Dick Vitale understands the impact he's made on thousands of lives throughout his career. What he does right now for cancer and cancer research shows you the heart that he has. As Coach Sutton would say, he has a big old Valentine. And I think I'll make a bold statement here. As far as media members go, I think John Madden probably did more for NFL football, even to this point in time, for media of NFL football. I'm going to stick with that statement. Dick Vitale has done more for college basketball than anyone in the history of that sport, maybe with the exception of John Wooden, but let's take it media-wise. But Dick Vitale has done more, and never, ever again will anybody be able to impact the sport of college basketball as much as Dick Vitale. I'll stand by that statement until the day I die.
Well, the spring of 1993, you make the jump from Bishop Kelly to joining a first-year head coach named Bill Self at Oral Roberts. I guess the easy answer, the short answer could be stupidity again. But how did you think you're ready to make this leap? How? That's not usually. You see a high school coach go to join a college staff, there's usually some sort of package deal because he's got a son that's a really good player. How did this happen?
Well, it goes back. We went to the Final Four again, and Oral Roberts at that time had gone through a dry spell, and the guy that had really exploded Oral Roberts had taken them to the Elite Eight, Ken Trickey, which is not far from where you're living, back in nestled up right next to you. But Ken came from Tennessee and had done a great job at Oral Roberts, and then Oral had brought him back, and then he just had it was just a time period where they weren't very good. And for whatever reason, Oral and Richard would come to my games at Bishop Kelly High School. And we'd gone to the Final Four again that year. And lo and behold, when the job came open, when they fired Ken Trickey, they interviewed 4 people for the head coaching job at Oral Roberts University. Andy Stoglin, which was Nolan Richardson's assistant at Arkansas, a guy by the name of Tim Carter that was an assistant at Northwestern at that time, an assistant at Oklahoma State University named Bill Self, and a head high school coach at Bishop Kelly named Barry Hinson. Thank goodness that Barry Hinson was smart enough to understand that he was not ready to be the head coach at Oral Roberts University. So let's just go down. Now we're down to 3. And
how did that interview go?
I interviewed Jeff. Is one of the most bizarre things. I was there on campus for 8 hours. Now they thought I was ready, but I knew I wasn't ready. So Coach Sutton, prior to that, had told Bill that Bill, I don't know if he said little guy, what he said, but I'm sure he said little guy. He said, I think they're really serious about hiring that little guy. You bet. And I had gone to school with Coach Self. We weren't buddies. It was more of an acknowledgement of who he was, but we had a great relationship because I would take our teams from Bishop Kelly to Coach Sutton's team camp, and Bill ran the team camp. And the relationship kind of started, and then it really bloomed when I went to work KU basketball camp. R.C. Buford, now the president of the San Antonio Spurs, was a student here at Oklahoma State, transferred to Kansas, said, would you and Bill's going to come work camp, would you guys come together? And I said, yeah. So I drove. That's how that started. That was the connection there. It wasn't from Oklahoma State, but it was working at KU basketball camp together. And that's kind of when the relationship started. And then it was built upon when I brought these teams over for team camp. And we just kind of had a pact. You go in there and talk about me, and I'll go in there and talk about you. And I did. I talked about Bill Self, and I'll never forget. I got a phone call. You'll appreciate this because you're coming. You'll understand this. But President Roberts, Bill called at 10 o'clock, and he said, and Coach has always done this. One thing Coach said, everybody's big boy, or everybody's bud, or everybody's buddy. And Doc Sadler, everybody's partner. Hey, partner. But we all coaches, and I'm hey bud, everybody's bud to me. Yeah. But I pick up the phone, and this is before caller ID. You just pick up the phone. Hello, big boy, ready to go to work? And I said, what? He goes, yeah, they're gonna hire us, and we got a press conference on I think it was Wednesday, and but President Roberts is going to call you, but act surprised because I'm calling you before. So he's not going to call you until 10:35. Reason being, they didn't want it to slip out for the evening news. And those evangelists now, they know how to make a splash now. So we waited, and so we had the press conference. It may have been Monday, but the press conference was Monday, and they announced us at chapel on Wednesday. And but yeah, that's how that started.
You don't have to teach history anymore. You just get to coach basketball. I mean, and you're, at this point, 32, 31, 32. I mean, is this, this is the dream, right? I mean, this is all you got to do is coach basketball.
Well, I don't want to say all I have to do is, because I miss teaching. I really did. I enjoyed teaching. I really did. But yes, now I get to do what I really want to do.
Right.
My dream. my dream since 1979. You know, my wife thought I was going to be the next governor of Oklahoma. That's why she married me. I became a coach. She's like, that's the greatest scam of the year. This century was right there, convincing her, because she's, hey, I mean, you knew I was a good recruiter. All you had to do is look at her. You remember that line in Moneyball when they're all sitting around and says, what's his girlfriend look like? You know,
Right.
yeah, well, that was me. They would have signed me immediately for the Oakland Athletics if they'd have seen my wife. Because that would, hey, first of all, that would have been said for Bill Self too. Both of us, we really outkicked our coverage. Both our wives were. In this term and day, in our days, we would say smoking hot. So we were very.
I think she would still appreciate that.
Yeah,
so.
we were very good recruiters, but yeah, it was my dream. It was my dream, and I'll be doggone. We go. I'll never forget Coach talking about how we were going to turn the program around. They went 5. I think they went 5-21, 5-20, or something like that the year before we got there. Coach told them we we're going to turn the program around, and we did. We did. We turned around our first year. We went 6-21. We won one more game than they did, and it was amazing that it probably did more for me in my life, and not for coaching, but just everything. It was literally ground up. I can remember like it was yesterday. He and I are in the office because it was just us two for about, I can't remember when our staff came on, but it was just us for about a couple of months. And we would literally be in the office at night. At that time, you had to lick stamps. We didn't have the self-adhesive stamps. So we lick stamps, lick envelopes, and mailing out season ticket requests. I mean, we did that. We did it all, and we had to. And I didn't know any better. I just thought that's what college coaches do. And then we would stay up until 1 or 1:30 in the morning because we could call back to recruit California up until 11 o'clock at night. We knew we could do that, and then we would get in the office between 9:30, and then go right back at it in and just love it. Love every bit of it. And, but that's, yeah, it was the good old days.
What do you remember about starting your recruiting journey? Aside from your wife, but just like, hey, you're on the road and now you're,
I'll tell you the best story ever.
Go for it.
Great story. Bill sent me to California. We were recruiting a kid, but first of all, we went to California because Oral was so respected at that time of his life. He was so respected in the South and California, and Oral lived in Newport Beach. So Bill said, we're going to send you out to California. My first ever recruiting, I went to California. And I'll never forget, I went to get the rental car. And you don't have MapQuest in, you got maps. And she says, and I'll never forget it, really nice lady. She goes, honey, where are you going? I said, I'm going to Compton. She goes, she kind of like, you going where? I go, yeah, there's, and I told everybody, it didn't matter if you were a waiter, waitress, host. Hey, I'm a college basketball. I coach at Oral Roberts University. I was so proud. I was peacocking everywhere. I was so proud. I was a college basketball coach. I went to California, and we had just signed a kid named Brian Chang that played of all things for Bob Gottlieb, Doug Gottlieb's father. And Brian Chang was at Huntington Beach High, and his dad had some players that he felt like we could recruit. So coach sent me out there, and I go to get the rental car. And I said, well, one of the places I had to go to was Compton. And she said, and she literally turned around and yelled back. I don't know if it was a Ford Taurus or whatever, but cancel the Taurus, getting something that's blue or getting something that's green, nothing white, nothing black. I have no idea what she's doing. I said, I can drive a white car. She said, oh, no. You're not driving a white car, black car in Compton. And I said, what do you mean? She said, oh, they'll think you're a police officer or something. They may shoot at you. And I go, huh? And I go, do you have a pink Volkswagen back there? But for a boy from Marlow, Oklahoma, which we had one stoplight and it blinked, to go into the 405 and to go from Redondo to Huntington Beach to wherever, Compton. I mean, it was probably one of the sped up moments in my life of getting an education. And I'll never forget, there was a guy at the time that was coaching at, he was an assistant at Pepperdine named Steve Eggers. And I've told Steve this story many a time. He ended up being the head coach at Eastern Washington, and really a good person. And he could just tell. He knew. He just looked at me and could tell that boy needs help right there. And he just kind of took me underneath my wing, underneath his wing while I was out there. And I was out there, if I'm not mistaken, Jeff, I was out there 7-8 days. And that was a big deal for me. And this is the one thing I learned about California. I'd never heard this before. I would ask, when you're raised in Oklahoma, you ask everybody how far. How far is it?
Right.
You don't ask them how long it takes to get there. I learned my lesson in California. It may be 6 miles, but it's going to take you 45 minutes.
Right.
So go, how far is it? They go 6 miles. Oh, okay. It'll take you 45 minutes. So you learn a lot of things when you're out recruiting. That's one thing I learned about recruiting in California.
Did you get the player in Compton?
Did not get the player in Compton, but even a better story, the player that Howard Chang wanted me to look at was a junior that played with Brian Chang. And I called back Coach Self and I said, this guy's good. Coach, he's really good. We need to recruit him. He said, anybody else recruit him? And I said, Coach, there was only 2 of us in the gym. He said, who was it? I said, there was a guy named Ludos from Arizona in there and me. He said, Barry, wake up, big boy. We ain't getting that kid. You know who it was?
Who's that?
Tony Gonzalez. How about that? Tony Gonzalez, of all things. And what's ironic about this, Tony Gonzalez goes to California, plays football and basketball, plays for assistant coach at that time, Curtis Townsend. That's who I coached with at the University of Kansas. And when Tony was with the Chiefs, we went over to an event. So I recruited Tony literally for over a year at Oral Roberts, wrote him letters almost every day and called him and recruited. And probably one of the greatest human beings I've ever been associated with as a college athlete and as a Hall of Famer football player. But I didn't think he would remember. We'd go over to a charity event. Curtis takes my wife and I, and we go over with his wife, him and Linda, and we go to this event, and we're not turned the corner where Curtis says, you know, they're hugging everything. And he said, do you remember? And before he could get the words out of his mouth, Tony goes, Coach Hinson. And I mean, absolutely melted me and made my day. And he said, this guy recruited me to go to Oral Roberts University. But that was one of my very first recruits. But to this very day, he's one of the most gracious, humble people I've ever been around. And what he does off the field is phenomenal. What that does, he changes lives every day.
Your last year, I guess your Coach Self's last year at Oral Roberts, that 4th year, you guys have some big wins. We got sort of the appetizer for you getting left at the NCAA tournament altar again, go to the NIT. But when in your relationship with Bill do you start to get the sense that he's going at the end of this year? And obviously he didn't leave till July, which is obviously very late in sort of the normal coaching cycle of usually guys are out in March or April. But when he leaves for Tulsa. So when you get into that summer, you're probably thinking, all right, we're just getting ready and we're going into the normal recruiting cycle to get ready for the next year. But when do you start getting into your solar system that he's leaving and maybe this is going to impact my life one way or the other?
It got into the solar system to the day the TU job came open. That's when it got into the solar system. And it moved. We were at a recruiting event. And matter of fact, we may have been at ORU at that time. Jerry Mullins ran a camp at the time. I can't remember if Jerry Mullins was running a camp or somebody was running a camp, but it just spread like wildfire. And it was just like, bang, bang, Jeff, bang, bang. We're going to Tulsa, bang, bang. But at the same time, one of the things that President Roberts had told me and had told Coach, and had made it publicly, he said, when we hired Bill and Barry, we hired the next 2 head coaches. And it would have been, it's interesting. That's the moment that my path, you don't know where my path would have been. And that's where a moment where you know that there's a greater power, because had I stayed with Bill, I would have coached at different places. I know I would have become a head coach, and I wouldn't have taken the same path that I had. I look back, my four years as an assistant with Bill were incredible. My 2 years at Oral Roberts University were phenomenal. They were difficult, but they were phenomenal. But the opportunity to coach 16 years in one league, a league in which I absolutely adored, I don't know if I would have traded that. If I'd have stayed with Bill, just because of him and the knowledge that I would have received, I would have probably had the opportunity to be at a high major. But I don't look back and regret in any way, shape, or form. I mean, I loved being in the Missouri Valley. I loved everything about it. I loved every community in which I coached. I loved all of it. And probably the love affair started so much because we weren't in a conference when we were at Oral Roberts. We were in the Mid-Continent Conference when I got the job. We went right into it. And, but it wasn't anything like being in the Valley, where it was a true basketball conference, a true basketball league. And I remember Coach Sutton telling me that the best coaches you ever coach against are going to come out of the Missouri Valley Conference. And I look back at today, just look at the guys that have come out of the Valley. Sure. It's absolutely a farm club for great coaches.
When he's gone, and now, again, there's some semblance of this has been preordained that you're going to be the guy. Is there a rubber stamp interview? Is it you just go in there like, just, all right, let's not screw this up in these 15 minutes? What was the final conversation with the president there that you got the handshake that you're our guy?
President Roberts told me. He just, matter of fact, he ran the university, and I love President Roberts, and he was always good to me, and I loved Oral. Oral Roberts was, people tell me all the time, how would you describe him? First of all, he's one of the most charismatic guys I've ever been around in my life. I always thought my dad and Billy Graham were the best preachers that I'd ever heard. And then when I was at Oral Roberts, I had to change my belief in that. I had to add Oral Roberts and Bishop T.D. Jakes. Those were the best preachers. Those guys. Bishop T.D. Jakes, that guy's got it on now. That guy's got it going on. And Oral was unbelievable. But Richard basically said, this is our coach. There was really no interview process. And when you're at a private school, you don't have to worry about that. Sure. So boom, boom. And Bill Haston will confirm this today. He's the writer of the Tulsa World. And John Klein were there at the press conference. And I remember I went down to the equipment room and I told the guy in the equipment room, give me the biggest shoe you got. And at the press conference, I pulled it out from underneath the podium and he said, I got big shoes to fill. And I knew I did, because I recognized a long time ago how special Bill Self was going to be. And I knew how big those shoes were to fill. And once again, I go back to my youthfulness and my ignorance. I was too young and too dumb to understand the pressure that I was getting ready to jump into. And I just went full speed ahead. And we were successful. We won a conference championship our second year. And then, of course, here we go. That starts off the next, flip the side of the album, and here we go to the next song.
July 4th, 1997, introduced as the head coach at Oral Roberts. And you said it's Independence Day, but it's my Thanksgiving Day. What is your, I guess, the number one with a bullet memory of that day for you?
The bullet is, I made it. I was very emotional. My family was there. It was Mount Everest. I'd always wanted to be, since 1979, I wanted to be a Division I head basketball coach. And I started coaching 7th grade AAU, and my first paying job was an 8th grade civics teacher coaching basketball. And it was culmination. Prayers, goals, a lot of people, a lot of phone calls made that day. Thank you for everything you've done for me, because I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for you. And then there was sadness, heavy, heavy sadness because, Jeff, there's probably, if I have to really go back to, I got a lot of great friends and I got a lot of people I love, but I don't think I could get outside of 10 fingers of people that I would jump in front of a bullet and take my life for theirs. Bill Self's one of those guys. I'd take a bullet for Bill Self. And that would be, that day was sad because we had such, one of the things I learned from him and being around Bill was everything was family oriented. Our staff, when we vacationed with our staff. When we did meals, we had meals with our staff. When we did celebrations, we celebrated with all the staff. And it was very, very important for me. And then we had such great friendships. Norm and Pascal Roberts, Norm Roberts, former head coach at St. John's, back on staff now with Bill at KU. We had just, and they had 2 boys, and Nico and Justin. And I mean, everything was, we were all family. And, Tyler and Lauren were Bill's kids. And it was just, that was a sad part of that day. And that's the first time that I'd experienced that, because you don't really experience that so much in high school, because you're just moving across the city or maybe across the state or wherever. But this, even though they were moving across, and then the other thing was we had to play each other. I didn't like that. I didn't like that. I didn't like that at all. And I never liked playing former assistants, former head coach. I didn't like that at all.
My last question. I guess the point of this podcast is there's no elevator to the top. Generally, this is a long grind for guys that want to run a Division I program. And for you, it was 15 years from being a middle school coach and then finally getting your shot there at Oral Roberts. For somebody that wants to take this path and wants to be a Division I head coach, and they know they've got to start in the basement and start working their way up to the penthouse. What is the one most important piece of advice that you could give to them?
You got to be Don Quixote. You remember, had the carrots at the end of the stick on the pole, and the donkey kept following the carrot. You just kept going. You got to keep going till you get the carrot, man. You got to do it. And you got to be able, first of all, you have to be able to make unbelievable sacrifices. Not you personally. Everyone in your life is going to have to sacrifice in order for you to get there, to do this, and to be successful. I would not be where I am today if it weren't for my entire family. I've got a great wife. I don't know how in the world, it'll be 41 years in August the 8th, 41 years. I have no idea. You want to talk about miracles in my life? That's a miracle. It's a miracle she hasn't killed me, and it's a miracle that she's put up with me for 41 years. But I've been blessed, and it's a whole village thing to get you there to that point, and you can't stop. And Jeff, let's go back. It's hard. I got fired at Missouri State after 9 years. Humbling. I'd gone to work for 27 years. I'd never not gotten up and not gone anywhere to work. It's the most humbling experience of my life. When I went to Kansas, when they hired me, I made $23,000, no health insurance, no retirement, and still had a house payment in Springfield, Missouri. When I got fired and retired and resigned at Southern Illinois University, they did not have a job at Oklahoma State University for me. I volunteered for a year. Volunteered. No money at all. When I got hired at Oklahoma State University, I got paid for 3 months, and the pandemic hit, and I got relieved again. And I volunteered again for first 2 years of my job here at Oklahoma State. I volunteered for 18 months. It's hard. But I remember Mike Holder, the AD at the time, he said, "Do you trust me?" I trusted Bill Self. I trusted Richard Roberts. I trusted the people at Missouri State that were really good to me. Bill Rowe, an athletic director there, still to this day. I trusted Doug Elgin, which was a conference commissioner of the Missouri Valley. I trusted Jerry Kill, which ended up being my athletic director at Carbondale. the guy that actually had to let me go, but I trusted him and I knew he would take care of me. I trusted Mike Holder and I trusted Mike Boynton. And every one of those people that I had an inclination to trust, they all paid off greater dividends than I could ever imagine. So you got to keep chasing that carrot, you know. And if you don't like carrots, I don't know, put artichokes out there on the end of that pole. I don't care what you do, but you know, I just remember that old guy trying to get to the next village and had the pole. He was tired and the carrots out in front of the donkey, and the donkey just kept going, just kept walking, try to get the carrot. And I think that's, you're asking for advice for guys that want to be a Division I coach. How about we just use that analogy for anybody that watches this podcast for anything that they want to do? It's just that simple. And I'll go back and I'm gonna add one little thing. We started practice this way every year that I was a head coach, including junior highs. And even at Kansas, the first thought of the day was, your performance is a reflection of your attitude. There we go, buddy.
There we go. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank you.